As a doctor, I've spent many, many days and quite a few nights with patients who've had heart attacks and are struggling with heart disease. Heart disease is the leading cause of death in this country among both men and women. That makes this a story that touches the lives of a lot of people. Heart disease is miserable. It saps you of your energy, your legs swell up, your lungs fill with fluid. It makes it hard to do the things you love to do. So in clinic, I encourage my patients to do everything they can to avoid developing heart disease, to stop smoking, to diet, to exercise, and often to take a variety of medications to control their blood pressure and their cholesterol. Few of my patients find any of this easy to do, but most agree that it's really important that we do everything we can to spare them a heart attack. I'm here to tell you that there is a simple and natural way to spare tens of thousands of American women from having heart attacks each year. That making this available to our patients requires no new technology. It has a side effect profile that is very well understood and safe. And yet, less than 8% of US hospitals are fully promoting this approach. Crazy, no? In this age of high-value healthcare, I'd expect anything that could save billions of dollars while saving thousands of lives would be a no-brainer. If you're like me, you'd be wondering, what needs to happen to make this the standard of care in all of our hospitals? I first realized that this critical ingredient was missing from our efforts to prevent heart disease among women shortly after the birth of my first baby. I had this flash of insight one morning as I was packing our bags for daycare, as I was looking in the refrigerator for my little bottles of milk. As a doctor, I knew all the reasons that breastfeeding was important for babies. I knew that it prevents infection, helps babies' brains develop, keeps babies from dying, even here in the US. I knew all this, but I also knew that sometimes pumping was a hassle. And sometimes I'd wonder, is there anything in this breastfeeding equation for me? What does breastfeeding do to the health of a mother? I stumbled across the answer to these questions that morning as I was looking for my little bottles of milk. Because as I was peering into the refrigerator, I found my sleep-deprived brain asking, is there butter in that bottle? Because if any of you have had a chance to see a bottle of human milk, you may have noticed that often the layer of cream on top is so thick that these bottles can bear a striking resemblance to a stick of butter. And having spent many hours encouraging my patients to lose the butter in their lives, advising them that butter is not part of a heart-healthy diet, I had to wonder whether losing butter, as I appeared to be doing by producing milk for my baby, might be good for my health in the long term. Or said another way, whether moms who don't get to breastfeed may be putting their hearts at risk. So I started reading, and we did some studies that I'd like to tell you about today. In its most basic form, what I'd like to share with you is the idea that breastfeeding really matters to the health of a mother. We've evolved to nurse our young. We're mammals, right? During pregnancy, a mother's body prepares to make milk. And after birth, lactation is part of her natural recovery. That means that pregnancy is really more than 9 months. It's about twice that. And when this process gets interrupted, a mother's body suffers. And in study after study, we've now consistently seen that moms who don't breastfeed have more heart attacks, regardless of their diet, their exercise, whether or not they're smoking, their family history, regardless of all these things. Moms who don't breastfeed end up with more heart disease. In fact, in studies that have used CT scans to look very carefully at the blood vessels around a woman's heart, we've seen that regardless of all the traditional risk factors for heart disease, obesity, hypertension, high cholesterol, diabetes, even markers of inflammation like C-reactive protein, After we consider all of these things, moms who don't breastfeed have 5 times the risk of having scarring of their aorta, calcium deposits that are early markers of heart disease. How's this possible? Well, we know that moms who don't breastfeed rarely get their pre-pregnancy figures back. On average, the waists of moms who don't breastfeed are 6.5 centimeters larger than moms that do. When studies have looked very closely at the waists of women, we see that moms who breastfeed have no more fat around their abdomen than women who were never pregnant. They're right back where they started. Back where those of you who will never be pregnant get to live. So you could all start worrying that you won't get the benefits of breastfeeding. Breastfeeding really matters, but only after your body has spent 9 months preparing to make milk. When this process gets interrupted, moms essentially end up wearing their ingredients as they go on into the future. Moms who don't breastfeed end up with essentially an extra stick of butter around their waists that moms who breastfeed manage to lose. But it's not just what breastfeeding does to the fat on a woman's body. Breastfeeding also has really important effects on a woman's blood pressure. The hormones that control milk production, prolactin, oxytocin, cortisol, all of these hormones also affect women's blood pressure for years and years to come. In fact, we see differences in women's blood pressure well into menopause based on whether or not they breastfeed their babies after giving birth. Dieting after pregnancy, even running a marathon, doesn't seem to have the same effect on a woman's blood pressure that simply breastfeeding after giving birth does. So how long does a mom need to breastfeed to get these benefits? Some of us need to take care of business. The most important thing from a mom's side of things is that she start breastfeeding. We see really dramatic differences in a mom's risk of diabetes based on whether or not she breastfeeds for even 1 month compared to moms who don't breastfeed at all. But when it comes to blood pressure control, it takes longer. It takes at least 9 months for a mom to get all the blood pressure benefits that breastfeeding has to afford. Now, I know there's some of you who are probably thinking, how do you know which comes first? Maybe it's that the moms who are going to go on and develop heart disease can't breastfeed. Maybe it's women who are obese, who are going to develop heart disease anyways, are the ones that you see as not breastfeeding. So I want to tell you that there have been studies that have looked explicitly at women who were heavy before pregnancy, and there we see the exact same patterns. Moms who don't breastfeed have higher blood pressure, higher cholesterol, more diabetes, and more heart disease. If anything, breastfeeding is particularly important for moms who are heavy before pregnancy because of the greater risk of heart disease they face due to their weight. I also want to tell you about a study that was recently done with some mice. Researchers took some lab mice that were virtually identical, and they split them into 2 groups. And the mice got pregnant, and when their pups were born, half were allowed to nurse their pups as natural, and half had their babies taken away. I know. The story gets a little bit sad, but I promise those babies were taken to a beautifully decorated nursery and fed very tasty formula. And then the researchers went back to the lab, and they followed these mice, the mommy mice, into the future. And what they saw was that though these mice had been virtually identical before pregnancy and during pregnancy, they had made these mice very different. The ones that hadn't nursed their babies had more fat around their bellies, they had higher blood pressure, and when they used echocardiograms to look at the way their hearts were functioning, their hearts didn't work as well. This means that nursing really does something to a mother's heart. Recently, I worked with some colleagues to try to model what the effect on our country might be if we moved from our current suboptimal rates of breastfeeding, where only about 20% of mothers are able to breastfeed as recommended, to a world in which 90% of women were able to breastfeed as recommended. Not 100%, as yes, there are some situations in which breastfeeding is not possible. But if 90% of moms could breastfeed each of their babies for their first year of life, we could prevent 14,000 women from having heart attacks each year. And we would keep 54,000 American women from needing to take medication to control their blood pressure every day for the rest of their lives. Clearly, that's billions of dollars in healthcare spending that we are wasting. But beyond all the money at stake, this is serious, heartbreaking stuff. It makes me want to ask all those hospitals that are still giving bottles to babies that don't really need them, don't you get it? From a mother's perspective, there is no such thing as supplementation. Every bottle that goes in that baby's mouth deprives its mother of a step towards healthy recovery. Every bottle that goes in that baby's mouth breaks the feedback loop that helps that mother produce all the milk that her baby needs. And it starts that family on a path towards early discontinuation of breastfeeding that leaves that mom with more obesity and heart disease than any of us want. Breastfeeding is natural, but that's not to say it's always easy. I was totally unprepared for the ways my body changed in the weeks after my baby was born. Like many women, I felt helpless and overwhelmed when my milk came in. But I was lucky. I got the help I needed to learn how to breastfeed. Breastfeeding takes a lot of commitment and encouragement, just like dieting and exercise and staying away from cigarettes. But if we're serious about doing everything we can to fight heart disease in our community, these are all things that need our support. Currently, most moms want to breastfeed. Unfortunately, there are a lot of moms who are not able to meet their personal breastfeeding goals. It means there are a lot of women who need more support from us than they're getting, particularly in communities of color, which tragically face the highest rates of heart disease and have the least access to lactation support. We need far more than 8% of our hospitals doing everything they can to help moms learn how to breastfeed. We need all of our hospitals to be certified as baby-friendly, or what I would call mommy-friendly, heart-healthy hospitals, because breastfeeding really matters, not just to babies, but to their moms as well. We need to realize that breastfeeding is much more than a child health issue. It's a women's health issue, and it's a community health issue. It takes a village to raise a child, and it takes a village to breastfeed a baby. Moms need to know that their community values the time and energy they devote to breastfeeding their babies. So, if you're a father, make sure your baby's mother knows that you appreciate the time she's spending feeding your child. That mom needs to feel appreciated by that baby's grandparents and neighbors and church and doctor and random people on the street. It means there's something each and every one of us can do to make it easier for moms who want to breastfeed. If you employ women, make it easy for moms to pump at work or offer on-site daycare. If you lead a hospital, make sure your hospital is offering high-quality lactation support. And if you're an elected official, or if you vote, make civilized maternity leave and evidence-based maternity care the law of the land, because every mother deserves to recover from pregnancy to her heart's content. Thank you.